This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. Thanks for checking in. It's deadline day for the Epstein files. The DOJ has until midnight to release all the files pertaining to the deceased sex trafficker. Democrats on Capitol Hill have released more photos from the Epstein estate. Republicans say it's meant to try and embarrass the president.
The Democrat Party is using the abuse of these women for political advantage.
I feel like in a way that it was used as a political smear campaign.
Democrats say the Trump White House has delayed transparency and the public deserves to see the full record. Before he committed suicide while in police custody back in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein spent years socializing with many of the world's elite. Manhunt over with. That's the other big story today.
We got him.
That man who shot to death two Brown University students in Rhode Island last week killed himself this week in New Hampshire. His body discovered last night in a storage facility 80 miles away from the crime scene in Providence. Rhode Island's Attorney General Peter Nerona.
It is unimaginable the pain that the parents and families of the deceased are feeling. But I hope that by bringing this person to justice, that we can at least give them the beginnings of some measure of closure.
Students at Brown University say they're just glad the 6-day manhunt is over with.
I definitely think there's a sense of relief in the community having found the person. I think that will make everyone feel a little bit better.
Authorities say the gunman who went on that shooting rampage last Saturday also murdered an MIT professor 2 days later in suburban Boston. The killer and the professor attended the same school in their native Portugal decades ago.
My understanding is that they did know each other.
Leah Foley's the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts. She says rental car records is what helped lead them to the killer's location. National security expert Tom Winter.
This individual took significant steps to try to avoid detection. At every turn, police were finding this car or trying to find this car. They were finding a new license plate on it.
The 48-year-old killer came to this country in 2017 on a green card through a diversity visa lottery, which the Trump administration has now suspended. Talks to end the war in Ukraine and keep the peace in Gaza are about to get underway in Florida. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Miami for high-stakes meetings with major players on both fronts. Today, they're discussing the next phase of the peace process between Israel and Hamas, and tomorrow, Witkoff meets with representatives from both Russia and Ukraine with the hopes of finding a solution to end that war.
We are as close as we've ever been. It's going to require everybody to roll up their sleeves. But I think if there's a chance for peace, we are going to push forward. And I think this is our chance. I think right now is the moment.
Former U.S. Ambassador Matt Whitaker says the Trump administration wants for the war to end, but it also wants Ukraine to be able to defend itself from the Russian invaders. The investigation continues into the plane crash in North Carolina that claimed the life of former NASCAR driver Greg Biffle and his family. The business jet erupted into a large fireball when it crashed into the ground near the Statesville Regional Airport north of Charlotte. Reporter Christian Benavidez.
4 minutes into the flight, the jet turned back toward the airport and appeared it was attempting to land when it crashed through the woods, ran through a fence onto the tarmac. It was in the air for only 8 minutes.
The 55-year-old Biffle, his wife Christina, their 11-year-old daughter Emma, and 5-year-old son Ryder were among 7 people killed in the crash. The Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. has just voted to rename that iconic institution the Trump Kennedy Center.
The Kennedy Center was created to be the national memorial to the nation's 35th president, with its name established by law. But now the center's board, which has been remade and is chaired by President Trump, is attempting to add his name to the center, too. It's just the latest move from a president intent on leaving his his mark on the physical city of Washington, and it's drawing a furious response.
Correspondent Garrett Hake in the nation's capital. The owner of TikTok has signed a deal that would create a U.S. version of the popular social media app.
Under Chinese ownership, Congress had concerns about national security, with all that personal data being collected and stored by the video sharing app. TikTok's CEO announcing they've struck a deal with the Trump administration to create a joint venture that will be majority owned by American investors. The new company will be responsible for U.S. data protection, algorithm security, and content moderation for TikTok. I'm Rory O'Neill.
A new Fox News poll shows an overwhelming majority of Americans want the federal government to proceed with caution when it comes to the development of artificial intelligence.
80% of those surveyed said they want developers of AI to be careful and address the risks, with 19% saying they want to move fast on it to stay ahead of China. Most of those who want a cautious approach are women, Democrats, those under 30. Older voters, Republicans, and men want to move more quickly. When asked who should be in charge of regulating AI, reaction was about split nearly evenly between the tech industry, state governments, and Congress, with just 11% saying the president. 48% say they use AI monthly. That's up 6 points in 6 months. Top uses of it include research, to ask questions, for work, and spelling and grammar.
That's correspondent Jessica Rosenthal. The Seattle Seahawks overcame a 16-point fourth-quarter deficit last night to beat their division rival, the LA Rams, 38-37 in overtime on Thursday Night Football. What a game. The win gives Seattle a 12-3 record and puts them in the driver's seat to claim top spot in the NFC playoffs. Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald says of his team,
the fight was there, and we figured out a way to win.
Figure out a way to win, indeed. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford says if they don't win that division, well, no big deal.
Listen, respect everybody, fear nobody. Go play.
The Rams fall to 11-4 with that loss. In other action coming up this Sunday, the Buffalo Bills can clinch a playoff berth if they defeat Cleveland on the road. The Philadelphia Eagles can clinch their division with a victory over Washington, or if Dallas loses, and the Pittsburgh Steelers look to take the lead in the AFC North if they can defeat the Detroit Lions. So a lot at stake in the NFL this weekend. Still to come on the Noon Report, free Christmas trees, mailing money in Pennsylvania, and winter is coming.
Good afternoon, I'm Kevin Williams. Well, it was spring this morning, but it's turning out to be winter this afternoon. I've got forecast details up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll see an active weather pattern in store for sure this weekend in communities along the Lake Belt. Southern Erie, Wyoming, Chautauqua, and Cattaraugus counties could see another 3 to 6 inches of wind-blown snow by early Saturday. There's a high wind warning in effect through early Saturday in Chautauqua County. The New York Cannabis Control Board is discussing its next steps after President Trump signed an executive order yesterday to fast-track the reclassification of marijuana. This puts pot in the same category of drugs as Tylenol with codeine.
We're seeing a message from the White House that cannabis is here to stay. This industry is here to stay.
That's marijuana activist Paul Armitano.
Rescheduling acknowledges the therapeutic legitimacy of cannabis as a medicine.
The marijuana industry is hopeful this move will make cannabis-based businesses easier to operate. 24 states have legalized pot for recreational purposes, and 40 have done so for medicinal use. Pennsylvania is mailing out money to tens of thousands of state residents. How come? Family Life's Brian Query.
If you live in Pennsylvania, you could be getting a check in the mail soon. Treasurer Stacey Garrity said Thursday that nearly 100,000 Pennsylvania Money Match checks totaling over $22 million are on their way to people across the Commonwealth. Created in 2024, Pennsylvania Money Match seeks to automatically return unclaimed property valued up to $500 belonging to a single owner without the need to search or file a claim. Unclaimed property can include dormant bank accounts, forgotten stocks, insurance policies, and more. Over 1 in 10 Pennsylvanians is owed some of the $5 billion in unclaimed property currently in the care of the Treasury. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you very much, Brian. A federal judge has ruled that ICE agents violated workers' rights when they raided a nutrition bar factory in the town of Cato back in September in Cayuga County, New York. The judge called the immigration enforcement effort an unreasonable search and seizure. So far, only one employee out of the 57 that were taken into custody has challenged that arrest. Well, 2025 is shaping up to be the least productive year for the Pennsylvania General Assembly in quite some time. The Democrat-led House and the Republican-controlled Senate were only able to pass 65 laws this year. That's the fewest in a decade. Republican Representative Cheryl Delosier says a lot of bills that should have become laws got stuck in committee.
There's a lot of bills out there that protect our children and education systems. We have issues out there with our child protective services. There's a number of bills out there that can actually have an impact on our constituencies.
The two sides were also unable to come to an agreement on the state budget for 4.5 months past the due date. There's talk in Harrisburg now of trying to move the full-time state legislature to part-time with the hopes that that might cut down on some of the dysfunction. Well, Christmas is the season for giving, and in one Niagara County, New York community, that includes Christmas trees. With the usual tree sales winding down, Treetop Acres in Cambria has been giving away its remaining stock of pre-cut trees for whatever those needing a tree can pay, even if it's nothing. Owners Patrick and Elizabeth Barsis tell WKBW.
Helping others, giving to others, that's the Christmas spirit.
We just thought it would be a nice thing to do to make sure they had a good home. We did a pay what you can sign. We had a lovely person leave us a really delicious pie from a local bake shop. We've gotten some plants.
To give back a little bit is a huge part of what we're trying to do here.
For those who can't make it to the lot to pick up their free tree, Patrick Barris has even been making some house calls to deliver those Christmas trees at no charge. Well, many give to the Salvation Army this time of year, and that allows the Salvation Army to give back to the community. Such was the case yesterday in Scranton, Pennsylvania. More than 200 families received everything from pantry supplies to Christmas essentials. Captain Neil Childs tells WNEP.
The biggest thing we've seen this year is the number of elderly that have reached out looking for food boxes, which is unusual, especially with utility assistance and stuff like that. We've had a lot more people coming in looking for assistance.
Volunteer Faquan Henderson says helping with the giveaway is a full circle moment for him.
I was homeless for like 9 months, so I feel wonderful to give back. This town is really awesome. It made me feel blessed, real blessed. I'm with God now, so it's made me feel real warm and open to doing things for other people.
The Scranton Salvation Army's annual Christmas food giveaway has been going strong now for over 50 years. This Sunday will be the shortest day of the year, sort of. Mark Mayfield explains.
The winter solstice falls on December the 21st. That's when the northern hemisphere will be tilted furthest from the sun and getting the fewest hours of sunlight. The day also marks the first official day of the winter season. Winter solstice celebrations will be held around the world, including at the Stonehenge Monument in southern England. After Sunday, days in the northern hemisphere will gradually get longer until the summer solstice in June. I'm Mark Mayfield.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. And still to come on the Noon Report for a Friday, the Capital Connection crew will be counting down the top 5 news stories of 2025 from New York and Pennsylvania. That's coming up right after this.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. One of the top Christian worldview stories of 2025 is the ongoing worsening situation for Christians in the nation of Nigeria. Now, at the end of October, President Trump designated Nigeria a country of particular concern. He also called on members of Congress to offer recommendations about combating the persecution there. Also, the State Department put Nigeria back on its persecution watch list. Secretary of State Marco Rubio threatened Nigerian officials with financial penalties, visa bans, and aid cuts if steps were not taken to curb anti-Christian violence and meet U.S. counterterrorism standards there. And all of this, which happened at the end of what was the worst year on record for Christian persecution in Nigeria, came as an answer to prayers and an answer to actions that were taken. For example, I joined 32 faith leaders earlier this year in a letter to the president, which called for that special designation. President Trump even threatened intervention in a post on social media saying, quote, "I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians," end quote. Well, the question now is whether or not the Nigerian government will indeed take meaningful steps to rein in the radical Islamic groups that are responsible for the increasing violence there. Since 2014, according to Open Doors USA, Nigeria has been the most dangerous nation in the world to be a Christian. And 2025 has been, by far, the worst year on record. Christians have been explicitly targeted with violence, including beheadings and church bombings. Millions have fled sub-Saharan Africa as religious refugees. The violence has led Open Doors to warn of an impending Islamization of the nation. The Nigerian government blames the violence on land disputes between herdsmen and farmers, and the Biden administration blamed the land disputes on climate change. These are ridiculous explanations and ignore the common elements of the conflict, namely that the persecutors are always Muslim and that the victims are always Christian. And Western media has also largely ignored what is one of the most significant human rights crises of our day. But other voices have become louder and more clear. In a speech before the UN General Assembly on September the 23rd, President Trump said to world leaders, quote, "Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today, Christianity." Dr. Anthony Bradley asked in an X post earlier this year, where is the Free Nigeria campaign? And why are the Free Palestine protesters also not passionately protesting Muslims in Nigeria? Christians around the world have to continue to appeal to heaven on behalf of our brothers and sisters in Nigeria. We must pray that God would strengthen them, that the gospel would go forward, even impacting the hearts of those who are persecuting believers for their faith in Jesus Christ. We also have to continue to ask our government leaders to increase the pressure on Nigerian government officials and demand their accountability. Their excuses and their inaction have enabled militants to operate with basic impunity, and for the rest of the world to ignore the atrocities there for far too long. Each and every day, Breakpoint brings clarity to stories like these, stories that matter while cultivating confidence in what is true. If Breakpoint has helped you and your family make sense of this cultural moment as a Christian, please make a year-end gift to keep it on the air. Right now, thanks to a generous $500,000 challenge, every single gift before the end of the year will have double the impact. You can give by visiting colsoncenter.org/December. That's colsoncenter.org/December. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, John, thank you very much. Let's take it outside next. Meteorologist Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast. It will be windy and sharply colder this afternoon. Leftover rain showers changing to snow showers. Temperatures dropping ultimately into the 20s in many areas. And then for tonight, some localized lake snow. Otherwise, much colder, patchy clouds and flurries. Low temperatures, mid-teens to mid-20s. Sun tomorrow, high in the 30s, mainly cloudy Sunday. Bit of afternoon snow and flurries, brisk and turning colder, with temperatures falling on Sunday from the 30s into the 20s.
All right. Well, it was nice while it lasts. Thank you, Kevin. It is Friday, folks, the 19th of December. Congratulations. You have made it. And this is the Noon Report on Family Life. And welcome to a very special edition of Capital Connection. It's our year-in review special report. We're counting down the top 5 news events of 2025 with Michael Gear at the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New York Families. What were the biggest stories of the year from Albany and Harrisburg? From 5 to 1, we're going to find out beginning with the fifth biggest news event in New York State. Jason, we drew straws and you got to go first. So what did you have as your fifth biggest story of the year?
Well, it's been hard for me not to acknowledge the lawfare that has been occurring in our state under Letitia James as the Attorney General. This Attorney General has really sought to tamp down on free speech. She has come after pro-life pregnancy centers, even the president. And lawfare seems to be one of the issues that we have to acknowledge was a major story in 2025.
And a few people have experienced that lawfare quite as personally as you have, Jason. So let's go to Harrisburg. Michael, what did you decide was the fifth biggest story of Pennsylvania this year?
Well, there's a story that comes over from the previous year, and that's the issue of protecting girls' sports, personal privacy, and things. That was a big issue in the 2024 presidential election, remains an issue in Pennsylvania. The challenge is that many people think that because of executive orders coming out of the Trump administration, that issue is resolved, and yet we still have school districts that are allowing boys to play on girls' sports, those sorts of things, locker room privacy violations. But we saw some real positive things like the Dads Defending Daughters press conference that took place with lawmakers like Clint Owlett taking a stand for privacy and for girls' sports.
Yeah. We're counting down the top 5 news stories from Albany and Harrisburg this year, a special edition of Capital Connection. Michael, let's stay in Harrisburg for number 4. What was fourth on your list this year?
Well, this relates to kind of the polarization that we've seen in our society and even the violence that we've seen, and specifically what came here to Pennsylvania with the arson attack on Governor Shapiro's mansion. And that points to the increased polarization, increased violence that we see in society, as well as the anti-Semitism, which was certainly prevalent in what happened with this nutcase throwing a firebomb and putting at risk the governor and his family.
Yeah, I think that's on a lot of people's lists this year when they look back at what happened in Pennsylvania this year. The fact that the governor and his family were unharmed, just amazing that could happen. Jason, fourth biggest story in New York, and why?
Yeah, similar to what Michael just referenced, I have the rise of anti-Semitism here in New York. We began the year looking at this as something that was on the left, and it is. You see those protests, you see what is happening on the college campuses, and you see anti-Semitism there. But in 2025, we began to see that there may be more of this in the right than people are realizing. And I think it's something that we're going to have to come to terms with is that there is racism, there is anti-Semitism, and it doesn't matter if you're left or right, it exists in each wing. And it's something that really we as believers, the followers of Jesus Christ, are going to have to come to terms with and to recognize and call it out when we see it, if we are to recognize the intrinsic and inherent dignity of every individual created in the image of God.
Well said. Hey, 2 down, 3 to go. We're counting down the top 5 news stories / events of 2025 with the Capital Connection crew. You hear them every Friday during the Noon Report. Michael Gear with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New York Families, our most popular radio program we have, for good reason. These guys know what they're talking about. They're in the thick of it at the state capitals. Jason, let's stay in Albany. Number 3 on your list this year.
I have the prison guard strike that occurred earlier this year. It was a blow to Governor Kathy Hochul, to her leadership. It's been a blow to the families, to the localities that are impacted in those places. And even to this day, the National Guard is still in these prisons. This is something that has never really been fully rectified. You can also expect to be a major topic in 2026.
Yeah, and who can forget those 3 weeks? I think it was back in February and March where those corrections officers went on strike. Just a major story for several weeks in New York State. Michael, in Harrisburg, so many stories. We've already mentioned that arson attack. We mentioned the transgender thing in PA. But what was the third biggest story this year in your state?
I think it's one that maybe not getting that much notice, but should, and that was the state of Pennsylvania issuing commercial driver's licenses to what apparently are known terrorists or people from terrorist states, like the driver from Uzbekistan getting a CDL and then being involved in fatal accidents, or even it's being revealed that PennDOT has, through the voter registration that happens at driver's license signups, that have been giving voter registration forms to non-documented or illegal aliens. Kind of a scandal here in Pennsylvania that's not drawing a lot of attention, but has impact on our voter rolls.
Yeah, I know Transportation Secretary Duffy is taking a close look at that. We'll see what comes of it. But that was a huge story, and you're right, it didn't get reported nearly as much as it should. So let's get to it. Now, number 2, down to the final 2. What were the top 2 news stories of the year? Michael, let's stay in Harrisburg. What did you have on your list?
I'm going to say the late state budget, which is becoming kind of old news or old hat, I guess, a habit of the legislature here. They don't care about that constitutional deadline, apparently.
Yeah.
But the positive in that budget, and this was part of the standoff, was that we avoided the bullet of legalization of commercial sale of marijuana for yet another year. So that was a good thing, even though we had a late budget.
Yeah, saving PA from pot was on my list. I know it's a fight you have been fighting for years, Michael. Unfortunately, Jason, you haven't been able to win that fight in New York. It's legal. But what did you have as the second biggest story this year in New York State?
Well, this is a story that is very important to our organization and maybe isn't, as Michael referenced in an earlier story, not getting as much play as it should, and that's the issue of state-sanctioned suicide. It's going to have a great impact on what happens with end-of-life issues in our state. The whole world of medicine has changed because now you've fractured the relationship between the patient and the doctor. And so this issue of assisted suicide is a major issue late in 2025.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's a huge one. I had that number one on my list this year in New York State. Michael, here we are. The biggest story, the most impactful event of the past 12 months in Pennsylvania. So many major issues this year. But if you had to settle on one, what would be your choice as the biggest story of 2025?
Well, I think I chose this one as number one because it takes us into 2026 as well, and that was the off-year elections, not only the Supreme Court elections and what rulings will come from this liberal Supreme Court, but also then what we saw in sweeps of school boards and other things. Many Pennsylvanians were just not awake or aware of the need to be involved and engaged in elections, and hopefully 2026, they'll see what happened in 2025 and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to get engaged in the political realm.
Yeah, don't sit this one out, guys. Don't sit it out. Too much at stake. Here we are, Jason. I could say it as well as I did with Michael. There were so many major events this year in New York State, in Albany in particular, at the state capitol. But if you had to pick just one, what would be your choice as the most significant news item of 2025?
I think it's the foothold that democratic socialism is making here in the Empire State. That was seen most clearly with the election of New York City mayoral-elect Zohran Mamdani, just the last election cycle, and he will soon be coming in to see what he will do now that he will be the mayor. But it isn't just about one man. This is something we've seen in the legislature. We're watching Democrats that are now have a major portion of their party as becoming this democratic socialist, or at least leans that direction. And that is going to shake up politics in our state house here in the year to come and years to come. And it's going to change a lot of Americans' lives if socialism gains much more of a foothold in this country.
Well, here we are, guys, at the end of the year. And as we celebrate the holidays and look forward to another year, you guys are looking forward to what's coming up. And, of course, in a major election, the midterms, control of Congress at stake, a number of governorships at stake as well in both New York and Pennsylvania. What are the issues you're going to be paying close attention to, Michael, in 2026?
Well, we're going to be doing a lot of education here in Pennsylvania about the issue of physician-assisted suicide, as it's called, because we know that it's a train that is coming. We see the challenges there in the state of New York, and Pennsylvania is not immune to that.
Yeah. Jason, it's been a challenging year for you, but as you and your organization kind of shakes the dust off of 2025, what are you looking ahead to in 2026 as the major issues you'll be tackling?
Yeah, some years more than others you're anxious to kind of put behind you, and I think 2025 is one of those.
Yeah.
And yet it's a platform that God has allowed us, and we see 2026 as a year of transformational growth for our organization. And I think two major things that we're going to see in the coming year. One is we do have elections this year, and they're going to be enormous for which direction our state goes. But in addition to that, I think there's a desire to see a greater Christian witness. I was at the Capitol just last week, and there was the so-called holiday tree there, and there was the menorah, and there was a Kwanzaa item as well, but there was not a nativity set. We couldn't even call it a Christmas tree. And, I think that it just demonstrates how in public life, we just don't have a whole lot of Christian witness. And organizationally, we want to be encouraging people to be courageous in their witness in the coming year. And that's another thing we'll be working on in 2026.
Amen. And I just want to put this challenge out to anybody who's been blessed. And I know thousands of listeners every week are blessed by what they hear on Capital Connection. If you are blessed by the ministry that both Jason and Michael have and you'd like to give, I know a lot of people like to give this time of year. Michael, where can folks give to the Pennsylvania Family Institute?
pafamily.org/donate.
And if you'd like to help out Jason, ministry is not cheap. And you know that, Jason, in New York State. Where can folks go online to support you financially?
NewYorkFamilies.org.
All right, the Capital Connection crew, they'll be back in 2026 for sure. Our program airs Fridays during the Noon Report or online anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. A potent cold front crossing the area today has taken our spring-like weather of this morning and returned wintry weather this afternoon. That will continue tonight. The forecast details: it will be windy and sharply colder this afternoon. Leftover rain showers in eastern Pennsylvania and central New York, changing to snow showers. Elsewhere, flurries in the areas of lake effect snow across western New York and western Pennsylvania. Temperatures dropping ultimately into the 20s in many areas. And then for tonight, some localized lake snow. Otherwise, much colder, patchy clouds and flurries, low temperatures, mid-teens to mid-20s. Some sun tomorrow, high in the 30s, mainly cloudy Sunday. Bit of afternoon snow and flurries, brisk and turning colder, with temperatures falling on Sunday from the 30s into the 20s.
All right, thank you, Kevin. And finally from us at noon today, a funeral for the penny will happen tomorrow in our nation's capital. Here's reporter Deborah Rodriguez.
As we sift through our last pennies, mourners will pay tribute to the discontinued coins at the Lincoln Memorial this Saturday. The event lists former First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln as one of the hosts, since her husband's face does front the 1-cent piece. The partiful invite calls the Treasury Department's decision to stop minting pennies last month not a retirement, but a murder. An organizer, finance operations platform RAMP, is encouraging funeral attendees to wear black Victorian clothing and veils, and BYOP, bring your own penny, the very first, was minted in 1787.
All right. A funeral service in honor of the penny. Deborah Rodriguez in Washington. And that's our world, the world we live in. Friday, December 19th. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.